Christopher Kennedy Lawford yesterday talked about, in his speech, he talked about how recovery and people in recovery have a tremendous amount to offer the world. And as somebody who loves addicts and alcoholics, who has addicts and alcoholics in their family, I've been the direct recipient of people in recovery reaching out to me and showing me a better way to live. About 10 years ago, my son, my middle child, was diagnosed with cancer. It was a low, despairful moment for me and my family. Very difficult. My good friend Sterling, a man of recovery, comes to my hospital, my son's hospital room. He takes me into the next room. And there he prays with me, a man in recovery petitioning his higher power on my behalf. You can get a sense of the moment, right? I'm in the pediatric intensive care unit. We've just been run over by this train, this disease train. And I always feel really comfortable talking with people who are in recovery or who understand recovery about this, because they get it, right? They get how I felt. And if anybody's loved somebody who's sick and they are concerned about their life, you get how I felt in that moment. So my good friend Sterling comes and he prays for me. In my memory, he does not pray for my son. He prays for me. Why a man in recovery prays for me and not my son? Explain that to me.
For your pain.
For my pain?
For your hope.
For my hope? Sterling understands, as people in recovery do, that I have no control. I am powerless over my son's life. And so he prays for me. He prays for me. We are powerless over my son's disease at that moment. So he prays for me. And I felt hope. And then, as Dr. McGovern says, I began to walk through the thistles of his disease process. Right? And many of you have heard my moment of exchange, where he was in the hospital for 6 months. We finally got him home, my son. A couple hours later, he spikes a fever and has to go back into the hospital. I am upset. 6 months of walking through the thistles, trying to hold on to my hope. I have a distinct moment with my higher power. I'm upset, I'm angry. I say words to my higher power nobody should say to anybody. I get real honest in the moment. And my higher power says to me, Tom, I can deal with that honesty. That other stuff you were doing for the last 6 months, I can't deal with that, but I can deal with this honesty. Right? It is combined with an overwhelming feeling of love that comes into the car as I'm driving to the hospital to meet my wife and my son. A two-word message from my higher power that says, trust me, to me. And then the knowledge in my head that whether my son lived or died, I knew that I would be okay. That was my moment of really turning from despair to hope. Right? It's something I will always remember. And I think that's part of holding on to hope in recovery, is remembering that moment. Each of you who are in recovery had that moment. And there's been times in my life where I've gotten low again or anxious again because of the things that have happened in my life. And then my higher power reminds me of that moment. And the words trust me come into my mind again. And I remember, right, that I am powerless over most of my life and only control what I say and what I do. But you know what? In the very end, no matter what happens, I will be okay. That is hope. Isn't that the essence of hope? Isn't that wonderful? And then because of that, I can expect things with greater confidence. And thus it's an outcome in the moment. I feel hopeful today. That's my outcome. But the process that we've gone through, that you've gone through to understand hope,